The search for extraterrestrial intelligence represents humanity's quest to find signs of life beyond Earth.
How can understanding them help us understand ourselves better?
If you're curious about SETI or ever wondered what a whale might have in common with an alien, you've come to the right place. Welcome to Whales and Aliens, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence in the Salish Sea. I'm your host, Lisa Walker. In 1974, scientists at the Arecibo Observatory sent a radio transmission into space, a message aimed at a distant star cluster. This was our first attempt to communicate with extraterrestrial intelligence, and it forced us to confront a fundamental question. If another mind receives our signal, would they understand it? To explore this question, we don't have to wait for a message from the stars. We can test our assumptions right here on Earth, with the intelligences we share the planet with, whose sensory worlds differ radically from our own. But how do we begin to communicate with them? Today's guest is astrobiologist Dr. Douglas Vakoch, a leading voice in messaging extraterrestrial intelligences and the founder of METI International.
Communicating with aliens is exciting because not only does it open up the possibility of encountering someone with a radically different understanding of the world, but in the process, we're guaranteed that more ourselves with one another. So I grew up in the Midwest on a little farm 10 miles from the nearest little village of 2,000 people in northern Minnesota. So especially on the winter nights, I could go outside and I'd look up and, I could see thousands of stars out there. And this was in the 1960s. And so this is as astronauts were first going to the moon. I was really interested in science. I loved science. And so I began wondering, could there be other little kids out there looking up there, wondering if there's anyone out there? And you're right. The question is, can you have a day job doing this? And so, I was interested in astronomy and biology and all these things you need. Ultimately, though, I decided, a reliable job is to become a psychologist. So I went to school. That's where I got my doctorate in psychology. But always thinking in the back of my mind, I hope I can somehow turn this into a search for aliens out there, because psychology is all about the forms of intelligence we have here, we intelligent beings, and how we connect with one another, how we communicate with one another, understand one another, what we care about. So I thought, look, if the point of communicating with aliens is to share something about who we are as human beings, what better preparation for a psychologist? So after I finished, it was this tough decision about, do I do the traditional route? Do I go on to become a psychotherapist or become a professor and teach? But I moved to a place called the SETI Institute, which stands for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, a research institute in Silicon Valley, and really started looking at what would we say to another civilization out there? What happens if, as we're searching for signals from aliens, so SETI uses radio telescopes to listen for radio signals that another civilization could be sending out. What happens if we succeed? What do we do? Should we reply back? What would we say? How could we create something? So that's where I got my launch, and that's how it became a career of tapping into this scientific community, looking for life in the universe and thinking about what happens if we find it. If we're going to communicate with intelligence out there, we can't do it face to face. I was interested in, space travel when I was a kid. We still haven't gotten a human to the nearest planet beyond Earth. And so to think about humans actually being able to travel to another star, maybe hundreds of years from now, but we're nowhere close to doing it. So right now, what we have to do is work within our limitations. But even a civilization as young as we are on a cosmic scale, we have the ability to reach out. And that's by using radio signals, which can travel through space at the speed of light and contain information about us. It's how we communicate with one another over distances. We can really extend the distances and communicate with intelligence through the same technology. And so when I say in a way we're the ideal species, it's because we're the only species on our planet who has that technology. So we can reach out. We have the radio transmitters, the same kind of technology that we hope people on another world have. So that's why we're, in a way, the ideal species. In a way, that we're the worst possible species, because look at what we're doing to our world. We are not very good ambassadors of our world. All of the environmental degradation, the international strife that is constant century after century. And so if we really want to send messages that are more representative of life on Earth, we need to figure out how to incorporate input from other species. So that's why the work that you're doing with whale communication is so exciting, because I think it opens up the possibility of really trying to understand what is the world like through another extraterrestrial intelligence. It's not that they're extraterrestrial, they're outside of Earth, but live in the oceans and seas. And so I think that communication with other species here on Earth actually could help us figure out how to communicate with another species on another planet. So I think it's exciting to look at this link between whales and aliens. We know aliens, we know how challenging it is after decades to try to understand another form of intelligence here on Earth. Imagine how much more challenging when we have to try to make contact with someone. We don't know where they are. We don't know how they communicate. We don't even know if they exist. But that's the challenge that we've taken on when we send messages to extraterrestrial intelligence. So that's what METI is, messaging extraterrestrial intelligence. Well, my personal evolution about how I think of making contact with alien civilizations actually parallels the evolution of the field, which started in 1960 when the astronomer Frank Drake used a radio telescope in Green Bank, West Virginia, to listen for radio signals from other worlds. Because astronomers are looking for radio signals that are being generated by stars and galaxies. And as they map the distribution of hydrogen, the most prevalent element in our universe, they're able to tell something about the structure of the cosmos. And so what Frank Drake realized is that the same tools that are being used by astronomers to understand the natural universe could also be used to understand and find another civilization out there very much like us, a civilization that uses radio not just to understand the universe, but to communicate with one another. And so he got time on the Green Bank Observatory to look for signals from other civilizations for 140 hours in 1960, two nearby stars, Epsilon Eridani and Tau Ceti. And the Ceti, of course, is the Tau means it's one of the least bright stars. So when you look at the name of a star, there are two parts of it. One part is what is the constellation that it's in. And Ceti is in Cetus, which is the whale. And then Tau is a pretty dim star because you start alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and Tau is all the way down where T is in our alphabet. So this is a really dim star, but it's really close to Earth. And it's very similar to our sun. And so the idea was, wow, maybe there is, even at one of the nearest stars, a civilization out there sending us signals. And so that's what Frank did over the course of 140 hours, listen for signals from these two stars. And unfortunately, he didn't find any signals. But what he did do is really establish the paradigm for how we could repeat this process with other stars. And so in the years that followed, people would look at another 10 stars or 100 stars, 1,000 stars. Now we're in the middle of a search called Breakthrough Listen that's looking for signals from 1,000,000 stars and 100 other galaxies. And so far, we haven't found anyone, but we continue to listen and hope that there might be someone out there. So that's been the evolution over the course of the last 60 years of our search for alien intelligence. And that's how I started too. You know, again, when I went to the SETI Institute, I was listening. I was part of the team listening for signals. I was charged with setting the schedules for where we should be listening each night and watching the signals as they came in. But the question that has continued to be in the back of my mind for these many years I've been involved is, you know, I hope they really are out there. They're sending us our signals. But then there's this really disturbing question, which is, what if the aliens are actually doing what we're doing? Everyone is out there, everyone is listening, but no one is transmitting. Maybe that's why we have this eerie silence. That there are other people out there, very sophisticated SETI programs, but they're just staying quiet. And so that's the shift from SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, to messaging extraterrestrial intelligence. And again, it's part of where my background as a psychologist comes in, because we have always assumed that the aliens are going to be motivated to be the first ones to reach out. But maybe, in fact, it takes us to reach out. You know, it's always challenging to try to anticipate what is this intelligence like in the first place? What is another civilization like? There's one thing that we can be really certain about, and that is that if we do make contact, it's going to be with a civilization that is much longer lived than we are. And here's why I say that. So we have had the ability to reach out across the stars for just 100 years. That's how long we have had radio. Now, it's possible that's the case on other worlds too. So you have radio for 100 years. Maybe you annihilate yourself in a nuclear war, or you destroy your environment and just everything gets destroyed and life is snuffed out. Or maybe you evolve, you become more contemplative, you stop exploring. But in any case, maybe there's only 100 years that you have to communicate with other civilizations. And so then the question is, how likely is it that a civilization like us, who's been around 100 years, is going to exist at exactly the same time as another civilization that has only 100 years to live? And especially given that, you know, over the course of a star that has a lifetime of billions of years, a galaxy that's 13 billion years old, what's the chance that two 100-year-old civilizations are going to exist at exactly the same time? It's kind of like if you go out on a clear, dark night and you see a couple of fireflies. Imagine each flicks on only once over the course of the night. What's the chance it's going to be exactly at the same time? It's not going to happen. So if we do make contact, either because we receive their signal or they receive ours, we know that simply to make contact, they've been around a long time. Maybe they're millions of years old. And so the usual argument within SETI circles then is, hey, look, it really takes a lot of foresight and a lot of commitment to be sending messages and then wait for a response back. They're the older civilization. Let them do the heavy lifting. You know, they've been around. We'll do the easier part. We will listen. And that makes perfect sense when you're first starting out the search. But again, we haven't gotten any answer yet. So then we start saying, maybe there are other possibilities. And one of the possibilities is that, yes, they're a much older civilization, but they say, hey, look, in this exchange, you young kids have so much more to gain than we do. Come on, show us you've got some skin in the game. You send us something, and then maybe we'll send you something back. And so I view METI as the next step for humanity in growing up in the universe. You know, in SETI, it really was kind of like a child's perspective. It's like, what can I get for me right now? And that's appropriate for a young civilization. But with many, we start saying, okay, what can we give to others? Other civilizations out there and future generations of humans who might get a response back. So it's shifting from an immediate gratification of SETI to a more long-term thinking that taps into something that I think is also primordial, which is that we are a caring, giving civilization, and it's appropriate that we should manifest that in our science. English or Swahili or Mandarin or any other language that we speak here on Earth is idiosyncratic. It has a history that words are arbitrary. The connection between what we say and what we're talking about, there's no inherent connection. There's no inherent meaning. So it's not something that's going to be obvious to an alien that we haven't had any contact with. And so then the question is, what can we use as a universal language? What do we have in common with the alien intelligence? And so what we have in common is that if they're getting our signal, that means they are trying to understand the universe. If they receive our radio signal, it means they're smart enough to build a radio receiver. So they're engineers, they're scientists, they know about the structure of the universe. And so that's what we start our messages with. Messages that talk about the physics, the mathematics behind our understanding of the universe. And it's really because, what is it that we can expect an alien to know if they can build a radio telescope? Well, it seems like you're not going to be a very good engineer on Earth or around any other star if you don't know something as basic as 2 + 2 = 4. So that's the starting place, some of these basic mathematical principles. And so when METI sent our first message to a nearby star in 2017, we focused on talking about that radio signal itself. So we described it in terms of the frequency that we're transmitting at. We introduced the notion of time by talking about how long the radio signals are that we're transmitting. Now, there have been past messages that have been more encyclopedic in scope. There was a famous message transmitted in 1974 from the world's largest radio telescope in Arecibo, Puerto Rico. And so we can send them pictures. We could send a big bitmap to describe our chemistry, what we look like, our solar system. But the downside of sending so much information, like the information in the Arecibo message, so early on, is that will they understand anything at all? Our strategy at METI International has been to send something simple, to take our time. Remember, this is a conversation that's going to occur across decades or centuries, maybe millennia. So we have time to breathe and to go methodically and to try to communicate something basic, because even though we expect them to know something like 2 + 2 = 4, it's not like we can write that out in Arabic numerals. We have to figure out a way to encode that in our messages. And so that's always been the starting point within the SETI community when we think about what we would want to say to another civilization. The messages like the hello from the children of planet Earth that was on the Voyager recording, that's a nice way of reaching out, but it's symbolic. We've always understood if you say something in a natural language, it won't really be understood. But now we're trying to actually go beyond this communicating basic principles of math and science to say something more essentially what it is to be human. Because again, if we search and we search and we search all of these years, and all we discover is that the periodic table is something that we have in common, that they know a lot about chemistry, personally, I'm going to be disappointed. I want to know something about what the aliens care about their art, about their culture. And so that's what we take as our goal. But the beauty of our way of making sense of the world and our describing what is aesthetically pleasing to us is that we can get at least a start. by tapping into some of those basic principles of math and science.
One of the things I've been looking at is song, and song, everything from a very stereotyped display to the highly evolving patterned song of the humpback. I think, at least for humpbacks, bringing in music into the equation is both mathematically supportable as well as intuitively elegant. What I've been doing is trying to put the math around it. How do you measure the musical structure of another species' song? Music is basically rule structure, and the bigger the brain, the more rules you can implement. And when you look at musicians that have excelled at their craft, that's what they've done. They've learned all the different rule structures. Like a scale could be a rule structure, a rhythmic pattern could be a rule structure. When you think about all the different components of music, you have this long list of variables. So if you take the human list of variables, you take humpback whale song list of variables, find that overlap. That's where I think the potential lays for cross-species interaction and maybe even meaning. I think there's so much depth to plumb there. There's the idea of, first of all, crossing the species boundary, the barriers that we have between the species on Earth, and then extrapolating that to the extraterrestrials. It's almost like assembling a new protocol. It's like taking ingredients from multiple different recipes and then make a communication protocol out of that.
So I know in your communications with whales, you have analyzed their vocalizations. So you can actually look at these sounds that they are making and analyze them in the same terms that astronomers use to look at the signals, the radio signals that are coming in from other stars, that each of those signals has a certain frequency. It lasts for a certain duration. There's a certain amplitude or intensity. And so though music is so much more, it is also a series of sounds that change over time that can be described in very physical terms, the same terms that a scientist would understand. But then once we've established that framework for saying, here are the sounds, now how do we make meaning? How do we make sense out of them? But again, we can also begin to explain our experience of the world, even how we think about the world, order the world, through examples of our music. So for example, one of the elements of a melody is that there's a sense of anticipation. So if you go up a scale, da 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 da, there's that last note, da, that you expect. It completes an octave. And so that is a way that we make sense of music. And that's just one of the simplest ways of finding order and meaning in music. And that's just one more way of saying this is how we human beings find order and meaning in the broader universe. I mean, you raise this wonderful point about how maybe song is what is universal, or it is seen so widely across species. One of our great challenges as humans who are really trying to understand the varieties of communication, because that's what we're trying to anticipate with the aliens, is to appreciate the variety of communication we see here on our own world. And in ways we are blinded to the possibilities because we're always trying to impose our notion of language on the world. And yet, what do we miss in that process? And so you're absolutely right. Yeah, we see these notions of song. Maybe it's a bird song that in some contexts might be very specific, or a warning call, whether it is of a bird that is warning that there is a predator coming, or you see it in ground squirrels as well, that there'll be a warning call that is emitted in a very certain context. But we tend to say, well, but that's not really language, because language is so much more flexible. We can create new words. We can string together these different words into sentences. We can talk about things that aren't really here right now, but that have been in the past. But the more we understand about animal communication, the more we see that other beings here on our world are doing some of those same things. So Kon Shlobochikov has done a lot of work on prairie dog communication and how they are able to create new words. They're able to create sentences. They're able to describe things that we used to say, well, only language can do. And so I think sometimes we feel challenged and we feel threatened as human beings because, oh, somehow we're no longer special if we're not the only ones who have language. And we just need to get over that because it's actually just putting blinders on that are stopping us from understanding the wonders of the natural world and the diversity of life that we have here. So I think, yeah, one of the goals is to say, what is there that's universal about language? But maybe even more exciting is to say, what are some of the idiosyncratic ways that other species have of communicating with one another? I think there's always been this sense in the SETI community that when we send a message from Earth, it should be something that we all agree on. And my concern is that's going to be a pretty brief message. Maybe the better thing is to think about how can we actually describe the diversity of beliefs, the diversity of the things that we care about. And with communication, maybe it isn't a matter of saying, what is it that's underpins both human language and song as seen in diverse species, but maybe there are different ways of communicating and saying something that's important and getting some meaning across and passing it on for long periods of time, perhaps even across generations. And we've often thought, well, it's only humans who do that, but you may have examples from whale song where there is actually this long history of a song that goes on and evolves across the generations. I talk to some SETI scientists sometimes, and they say what they just want to know is if there's life out there. I've got to think that in a universe that has billions of stars in our galaxy alone, and then there are billions of galaxies somewhere out there, there's life out there. There's intelligence, can we reach it? We don't know, but I think it's got to be out there. So I don't actually find that all that interesting. What I want to know is what are they like? And how can understanding them help us understand ourselves better? I mean, because it's not just that we want to copy the aliens. I think sometimes people are just they're looking for solutions we don't have here on Earth. I think it's more like going to another culture here on Earth. It's not that we want to adopt that culture, but we want to use it to see ourselves differently, to say that there are parts of our life that are kind of arbitrary. They don't have to be that way. Families don't have to be this way. You look at the differences of how people order their lives in individualistic versus collectivist societies, and it's like, whoa, there's a radically different way you could decide how to live your life. I think the more we can do that with other species here on Earth and potentially with alien civilizations, that gives us a new understanding. And so it's not just a new understanding in terms of are we alone, but what does it mean to be these human beings who gather information through our eyes and through our hearing, and not so much through other senses like some other animals do here on the world? And what happens if we start imagining what the world is like through other species? The beauty of whales is we've got an opportunity right here and now to better understand them. And so that's why I think the work that you're doing is so critically important.